Sydney made it. Only me and Sydney. Where is everybody? I don't see faces. I just see these long names. Ugh, lame. Lame. Okay. Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and get started even though there's so few of us because there's good info today. Today, I'm actually also going to talk to you. Oh, thanks, Christine. I'm also going to talk to you about the project that's coming up. It's not until week 7. It's not even due until the end of March, but today's talk is the introduction to it. And so this talk particularly is, I'm going to do a lot more talking than normal. You're not going into any groups or anything. I'm going to talk you through probably this hour and 15 minutes because the topic is one that's near and dear to my heart, but it's also the topic that you're going to use for your project in the class, the critical assignment. It's also an assignment that you can't pass the class if you haven't passed the assignment. So you want to make sure you pass the assignment, that high stakes paper, or other things, other options. All right, so let me get you looking at my PowerPoint with me. Where is my PowerPoint? It's not open. There it is. Just taught this. Okay, so I want to kind of give you a brief reminder about the difference between assessment and test, perhaps, and high-stakes tests. They're different things. We always, as teachers, want to use data to help inform our teaching. We're going to do lots of different data samples. We're going to assess in lots of different ways. But when something becomes high stakes, it should make you question why you're doing it. So what we mean by high stakes is that something good happens if you do well, and something bad happens if you don't. So a test can be a solid assessment, but if we use it incorrectly, it then becomes high stakes. But assessment in and of itself, you need as a teacher. You want to know what to teach, for example. Like, you're going to use your TEKS and be looking at what it is that I'm supposed to be teaching. You don't just walk in there with, a folder and a piece of paper and be like, all right, I'm going to be the best 4th grade teacher there is. There's so much planning that goes on. We want assessment to guide our instruction. Absolutely. We want to monitor our teaching. Us. Now notice this is on us. A lot of times kids will think that it's about them, like how bad they do or how good they do, when really an assessment should be looking at what you're doing as a teacher and who's getting it and who's not. Because if you've got a few kids not getting it, and you've done your due diligence, you really try to teach them, more of the same doesn't often equal better. So if I'm the one teaching the kid the same way and I just keep pummeling the kid with summarization, we practice, and he's still not getting it, ask another teacher in your quad or in your group to teach and say, you'll take a couple of their low ones and give that teacher a couple of your low ones and then work on the subject. Because it's about you. Like, there's something going on with you in the teaching and the kid needs to hear it a new way. This is also why holding kids back, failing kids, doesn't work very well, especially in San Antonio. But it doesn't work very well. There's not a lot of research that shows that it ever does. When we hold a kid back, what ends up happening is the kid stays in the same school in the same grade and gets a different teacher. But remember, teachers plan together. So it's like giving the kid more of the same. So in order to hold a kid back and have progress, you would probably need to send him into another school. The only grade that I know that research shows, and I would say this is the only grade I would ever hold a kid back, is 1st grade. 1st grade. By the time they get into 4th and 5th, you start having emotional and socio-emotional issues when you hold a kid back. Because they have best friends now, and they like this, and they hate this, and they've got all this personality. And basically, when you hold a kid back in those grades, it hurts them in a different way. It hurts them socially. It makes them feel stupid and dumb. And so you end up with a lot more problems than you ever did passing them on. With that being said, you still want to make sure that they have had enough intervention. Okay, I digress a little bit. Okay, so we want to make sure that we're giving good critical feedback to parents, that we know what it is that the kids are struggling with. Parents need to know what it is. So if we're using assessment to figure that out, that's cool. We need to have some form of assessment to know how kids get into special instructional spaces. So special education or gifted and talented, which we're going to look at some of those exams later on. Often regular teachers don't ever see what makes a kid gifted and talented. They just know the kid's weird or, yeah, the kid seems to be smart. but we're going to look at how it is that we put a kid in. We want to make sure that our kids are meeting the grade level standard. So I want my kids who are in third grade to be at the end of a third grade year by the time they move on to fourth grade. That's my goal. But that's my goal. That's my goal. And of course, assessing our own teaching. If you want to impress a principal during your first year, or even when you're doing your student teaching, videotape yourself. Do yourself a reflection, and then go in and talk to the principal about it. Have them look at a part of it, or say, here's what I noticed about myself. Do you have any critique or any ideas that would help me? You will be hired so fast, just so you know. All right, so assessment isn't in and of itself bad. It's only when we start using it for very big, problematic things that it's bad. So let me show you. Now, remember, there's two types of tests, formal assessment and informal assessment. We're going to hit informal a little bit later. This is kind of the talk and the look at formal assessment. Formal assessment just means it is a test that has been validated, is shown to be reliable, and that if I give it at any time during that year, third graders will score around the same thing. It's just kind of saying, okay, well, it's standardized. When we say that something is formal, we most often are looking at a test that uses a bell curve to decide its scoring. So the STAR test and your exit tests, they're high stakes, and they're going to use this normal distribution, also known as a bell curve, to decide how you do. Now, there's nothing wrong mathematically with using this. All it says is that 64% or 68% of anybody who takes this test, 68% are going to score in the mean. They're going to be the middle. So of everybody taking the test, we want 68% to be in the middle. Then we're going to have these other little bits up here that are bright kids, gifted and talented, bright, they do really, really well on assessment, whatever, they're up here. The ones that are struggling are special ed kids or kids who are just down in the bottom, they're going to be down here. But the majority of the kids are going to be here. So if I say I'm looking for what's typical of an 8th grader taking their reading test, I would, if it's going to be a formal assessment, get the score, look at all the scores of all the kids in all my classes that took it, all the 8th graders who took the ELAR test, and I would say I want 68% to be here. So in order to do that, if I gave the 8th grade test, right, and we had 100 kids take it, 90 of those kids scored a 90%. They did really good, like really, really awesome. Now, that's not what this needs. This has to show 68% are going to be in the middle. So if the middle is a 90%, because remember I told you most kids did really well, it was a 90%. That was what the average was. That's the middle, was 90%. There were some kids who made a 97, some kids who made a 90, or this would have been made a 99, some people made a 90, 100, some people made 102, right? That's over here. Over here is going to be anything underneath that 90. But 90 becomes this middle. Because remember, with a bell curve, we're looking for a normal distribution, a typical distribution, which means 68% of the kids made a 90%. So now it's that 90% is in here. You thought, oh, well, 90%'s got to be up here. That's really good. That's an A. But the A is actually your mean. It's your middle. So we take this bell curve and we shift it. So if all the kids were over here at a 90%, right, we would then shift the bell curve up. If they were at a 60%, let's say they took a test, they took this test and they made a 60%. They did not do very well at all. But a whole bunch of the kids made a 60%. The majority of your kids made a 60%. Your 60% becomes here. Because most of the kids did a 60%. So these up here might only be a 70 and an 80. These over here are going to be a 50 and a 40. But the majority of the kids made a 60%. So they are in this middle part. So I just shift it. Boop. So now a 60% is actually passing. And you're going to see this when I show you some of the scorecards for STAR. Because when they give STAR, you take STAR and they open the package and they bullet all this stuff. And it's so, they've got monitors walking up and down and they threatened your job and all these things, and you're standing there scared and you don't look at anything, and the kids take that test. They don't get a score for months. And that's because in order to score it, they have to get all of the kids who took it, all the kids who took the 3rd grade STAR test across the entire state, every kid. Then they do the numbers, right? And they say, okay, most kids scored a 65% on their math test, okay? Their math test. So now they look here and they say, okay, 68% of the kids scored a 60. That's the majority. Now this majority, especially on this side of the slide, the majority are going to pass, which means 60% was passing. Now you as a teacher would say, you know, if a kid only got 6 questions out of 10 questions right, I would fail him. That's not good enough. If a kid is missing 4 words out of every 10-word sentence, they're probably struggling with comprehension. But according to the test, 60% was the middle, which is why it is so unconstitutional to use something like this, that we move back and forth to put kids into small little boxes. Like, this kid's a failure, this kid's a failure, this kid's a passer, this one's commended. That kid that's commended, he can go play on the computer. This kid who's low has to sit with me and do intervention constantly. Okay? All right, so this mean is the middle. We shift this bell curve depending on how many kids are in the middle. We want most kids to be in the middle. It's not about a percentage, it's what's in the middle. Then we move from the mean standard deviations away. So what this means is a set percent away from the mean. So this is 1 standard deviation better than the mean, 2 standard deviations better than the mean, and 3 standard deviations. These are your kids who are usually a little awkward. They probably should be moved up another grade level in terms of their content, but social emotionally they're regular 3rd graders or whatever. Then down here, you've got kids who are really struggling, but are probably still in general ed. And then down here, you've got kids who have been in special ed. Okay? So, but the middle is going to be 68% regardless of how many kids made 100. Which is bad because it makes it sound like on the STAR test, if all the kids in your class made 100, you get a pizza party. Like, everybody can make 100. They cannot. If everybody made 100, they would scoot this so that 100 is right here, and then we'd see who's below and above it. They skew the results by moving it, and then attesting that this means that the school's doing well or the kids are doing well. So no matter what bell curve I give you, or what bell curve you see, it's always called a normal distribution, and it means the same thing. It can give you all these extra numbers. That's all good and fine. What you need to look at and you need to understand is this middle part. This middle part is going to be 68%. That's your average kiddo. The average kiddo who took this made a 90. The average kid that took this knew 25 words, whatever. Then you need to know that moving down means they did worse. Moving up, they did better. Okay? That's all you got to know. Okay, so let me show you what this looks like over time. You'll never see this chart anywhere else. This is me looking at scores and being nerdy. This is my nerdy score page. But hopefully it makes you go, what? Okay, so the red dotted line and straight lines here, this is our Texas assessment. Okay, in Texas, we give a new assessment. Well, we give a new test every single year, but we give a new titled assessment when we get a new person as our governor usually. When we get a new governor, he runs on a platform that says, we want to make schools great again, add more content, make sure they're ready to prepare themselves for global citizenship. There's never been somebody who runs that doesn't have an education platform of making education better, right? Nobody says, kids are fine, schools are shitty, we're good. Let's work on airplanes. No, of course not. So they're going to run on a stance of education for all, right? We get behind them. No child left behind. Who wants to leave some kids behind? Nobody wants to leave kids behind. So people get all pushed up in this stuff. But the truth is, anytime a new test is given, anytime we get a new big test, because our governor makes a new test because, he can't say, leave schools the same. So we get a new test, and when we give that test, kids bomb it. They do awful. No matter what teacher they have. In general, kids do awful. So they do awful for a couple reasons. One, the teacher didn't know exactly what's going to be on the test. The first time that the test was given, how was the teacher supposed to know? So they give the test, and the kids do awful. And when the kids do awful, the newspapers start printing things that say teachers don't do their job, they're glorified babysitters, why do we pay them so much? Kids can't read, kids can't write, kids aren't doing math on level. Okay, so that's what the people hear. Now, in the meantime, you're going, yeah, my kids did really awful. And then Pearson or Harcourt, they start sending out new textbooks. Everything's aligned with the test now. You get professional development. You have to go after school all the time. You get workbooks. And guess what? Because Pearson makes a test, it starts getting better, right? Like kids start doing better. You now know what's on the test. You're following your TEKS, or back down here it would have been EEs, essential elements. So you're following that. And guess what? Kids start getting better at taking the test. And what happens here? Well, guess what? We get a new governor or a new person in charge of education, and it plummets when they give their test. Then your companies start making a lot of money because they're now sending out professional developments, computer programs, new worksheets, new textbooks, everything new. Now remember, most things stay the same. When you teach about the Alamo, you don't need a new book to teach the Alamo, but your district will be required to buy one. Just so you know, like you get new, but they spend millions of dollars on textbooks that are almost exactly the same as the textbook before. But during this time, who's making money? During this dotted line time where scores are going up, where's the money going? Because your districts are spending a bunch of money in here. What are they doing? What are they spending it on? Why are scores going up?
On new books, new content.
Yep. Professional development. Do you know when I go out and I teach a professional development, I make $450 a day? I make more doing that. If I could just do that, I would make more doing that than I ever do this. And I only say that to prove to you, they bring people like me in to teach about the test when I don't even believe about the test. So you're going to spend $450 for me to come out and for you to sit for 8 hours with me while I show you how to beat the test. Which really should never be your goal. Your goal is to see what the kids know. But if it was really about that, then people wouldn't be scared. So your districts are spending tons of money having people, having worksheets, having new professional developments, and it gets better. Now, right in here, when we did the new tax test, that was the first test that had it was heavier content, right? Lots of summarization, lots of inferencing, things that kids kind of struggle with. And so the scores went way down when we got our new governor here. Now, over time, they go up just like they did before. And then I used to, because I started teaching this in 2008. And so I used to say, get ready. There's going to be a new test. Get ready. And guess what? 2011, the STAR test hit. And my students were like, oh my gosh, you're like clairvoyant. They're like a fortune teller. No, like look at this. It's a pattern, guys. It's a pattern. It's just a mathematical pattern. Now, right now, we're in the uptick. We've been doing STAR tests, and actually kids are getting better at it. Districts are spending money. Pearson's making a lot of money. They've got new computer programs and iStation's new, and they're doing all this stuff, and it's going up. And what's going to happen? Look at this pattern. What's going to happen?
I'm sorry, I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
So this pattern that we see, does it really benefit the student to offer them a new test? Or are we just in like an endless cycle of failing and then succeeding, failing, and then, you know what I mean? Like it doesn't seem like this should be the way to do it.
You're right, Monica. It's not. And I'm going to give you an example of a test that's exactly kind of what you're looking at. That's the green line on top. So I'm going to talk about the green line on top, and hopefully you'll kind of see. And just like Francisco is saying, he's like, it's all about money. It is. Pearson is the devil. If you walk away with one thing, Pearson is the devil. They charge hundreds of dollars for your textbooks. They make you do all of these specific things, and they're in charge of it. And they're not teachers, guys. These people are not teachers. These people are just making tests based on what they think third graders are, and you're looking at your third graders and going, well, that one, she's really high, and this one needs some help on summarization, and this one needs some vocabulary work. Your kids are Francisco and Monica and Marina. Those are your kids. The state does not care about Marina, does not care about Monica, does not care about Jenny. They care about the score, and your district doesn't either. They don't really care about the kids if they're doing things like this. And this is what they're doing. So it's going to come. So probably somewhere in, I'd say 2024, it's probably going to be the next hit, and we're going to get a new test. And it might be called Star 2, but we're going to get a new test, and scores are going to tank. And all the newspapers and everything's going to say teachers can't teach, they don't know how to teach reading, kids aren't reading, they're not able to be global citizens, our kids are dumb. All of these horrible things because the test is not appropriate. Then over time, the teachers will get better at testing and the kids will go up again. And this is how Texas works. They've been doing this since the 1980s in Texas. Now there is a test, just as an example, there's several examples. This is probably one of the best examples of it, is the NAEP test. This is the National Assessment of Educational Progress. This is a test that's been given since the 50s to kids in 4th grade, 8th grade, and 12th grade. And what they do is they randomly sample states all across the United States. They randomly sample areas trying to get a very diverse pick. So they pick school districts that might be primarily Black, Hispanic, multilingual. They pick all over the state, rural, urban, and they spot pick. Once they've spot picked based on the numbers of kids that are in that particular state and making sure that they have a good diverse group, they then tell that group they have to test. It's not the whole entire school district. It's just, say, 4th grade. Okay, we're going to test 4th grade. So you might have gotten through and never done this. They do it every year, but you might have never done this. But some 4th graders did. They kind of did it for you. What this test does is they do it in 4th grade, 8th grade, and 12th grade, and they look to see how close to proficient are kids at reading. It does not tell you how Jenny did or how Monica did. It only says, overall in Texas, how are they doing? So, and how is the United States doing? So when we look at this one, this green line here sort of represents what the NAEP test looks like for 4th graders in reading. This is 4th grade reading. But all of them look very similar. They're all kind of straight over time. Now, there are a couple of little dips here. I'm going to tell you about that in just a second. But you'll notice that when I give the 4th graders in 1980 the test, then a little bit later I do a very similar test to the 4th graders in 1990. What you see is that, hey, they're kind of similar. Because here's the deal, guys. Main idea did not change between 1980 and 1991. Main idea is still main idea. Multiplication is still multiplication. So what might have changed is how we're teaching it. The depth and complexity of it might have changed some. But really, the actual topics are the same. So we can look over time, and if we look at the NAEP, it remains pretty constant, telling us that, hey, 4th graders, this is what they look like. 4th graders read just a little bit below that 80%. So they're not totally proficient, but they are not awful either. They're reading kind of like every other 4th grader reads. I'm going to come back to this chart in just a second. I want to show you what I mean. So this is an example of the actual scores for that green line. Okay, so that little green line had in 92, it was 217 on the test, 214, 217, kind of gets a little bit higher over here by 2015, is 223, but you can see it's very linear, it's very straight across. This says, hey, it actually is really good at showing us where the kids are overall. You'll see they're just a little bit below proficient, and we're getting there, but we're just a little bit below proficient. I like to think about it like scaffolding in a way. You know, this knowledge bullet, you're just a little bit, you need just a little bit of help. And that's what we want to test to show, right, where the deficiencies are. So if we look here, you might see a little dip here, but it's very small. If I were to do this green line further down, like into the 1960s, specifically 50s and 60s, if I did that green line, it would still be fairly straight across, but you would see some dips like this. These small, statistically significant dips right here are usually when something is going on in the United States, like a war. So if the United States is at war, or there's a new law. So like right around here, we got the new law for IDEA, Individuals with Disability Education Act. We said, hey, if you're in special ed or you have some sort of disability, you still have to take the test. That's what NAEP said. You have to take it. We're not going to not, every kid gets it. It doesn't matter. If I come to your district, I'm getting your autistic kids, I'm getting your special ed kids, I'm getting your English language learning kids. They are all children who are 10 years old. That's who I'm testing. And I don't pull out kids for being something else. They are 10 years old. They are in third grade. They are being tested. If they can be tested, we're testing them. So these little dips usually happen when a new group gets added. So here we added all kids with disabilities. In the 50s and 60s, in 1963, Brown versus Board of Education happened. Said, hey, schools are not equal, and kids of color are not getting good educations. And they started moving kids and shipping kids to different schools. Now, for Texas, we didn't even start integrating schools until 1970. The law was 1963. That's how long it took us to do it. And when we did it, we ended up with test scores going down. Why did test scores go down during integration?
I'm just guessing, but I'm assuming because integration was more than just requiring them to come together. That was probably very stressful for them as students, very new. I know it wasn't a smooth transition.
Yeah.
Maybe all of that going on.
Yes, that probably was, absolutely. So you had these sort of internal struggles now.
Also, sorry, I was going to say also, I think the students before hadn't been receiving proper education services, and so of course they weren't given enough funding, they weren't given enough attention or resources, and so they were going to be very far behind.
That's it. They weren't getting an equal opportunity, and so as a result, when we put them in with schools that were supposedly white and getting the opportunity, scores went down because now it didn't matter what color you were. For the NAEP test, we're going to test you. There were no subgroups. There's no subpopulations. It's like we test everybody who's 10. And so if we get all the kids of color who come in and they have not been getting an equal education, well, when this test is given to them, all of a sudden it looks like we have a huge problem. So that's where you get the dips. We saw dips during the Iraq War. We've seen dips from all the way from the 50s up. Okay, you see a small dip. They are not huge. You still see a very linear line because kids who are 10 years old score about the same. 10-year-olds back then and 10-year-olds now are very similar. They're what's developmentally appropriate for a 10-year-old. Now, there are new skills that 10-year-olds have that they didn't have a long time ago, but those aren't tested skills, right? So let's say, now fourth graders can search on the internet, mess around with coding, they can fix your printer, and they, understand how to use the remote control of the television, which for me is high level. I can't seem to do it. So they have skills that might be seen as way higher than skills in 1950. And it is true. Fourth graders now have more skills than they did back then. But the test isn't about those kinds of skills. The test is about summarization. It's about main idea and character feelings. So it doesn't matter. The test got a little bit harder here with TAKS and with STAR because it had some of that inferencing in there. Whereas this is the Texas Assessment of Basic Skills, Texas Education and Math Skills, something like that. So it is that the test got a little harder here. But the test in general is just the test. It's the same skills, guys. And I tell you what, the kids, when you go out into the schools, you'll see they struggle with exactly the same things. It doesn't matter what year. So in third grade in 1999, kids struggled with summarization. In 2009, they struggled with summarization. And in 2021, they're going to struggle with summarization. And because developmentally, coming up with something that is about everything is hard. Inferring when somebody didn't say something is hard. It's why you can't be sarcastic with first graders, because they're not developmentally ready to get it. Here, I'll tell you my story about this. I was subbing for a kindergarten class. So kindergarten, I've never really worked much with kindergarten because as reading specialist, I worked first grade and up. And I think they're really cute. They're like cats, though. They stick to you. Like everywhere you go, you got these little kittens. So, but I was subbing in this kindergarten class. They were really concerned about their teacher not being there. And so I said, well, Miss Rodriguez, she's in the closet, but I'll let her out as soon as we have a good day. So we had this great day, and this is supposed to be a classroom hell. I had this great day with the kids. The PE teacher was like, I don't know what you did, but they were so good, blah, blah, blah. We get lined up at the end of the day, and they are lined up, and then one kid starts crying, right? And then another kid starts crying. And I'm like, wait, we're getting ready to go. Like, what's going on? And it like is communal crying. And it gets bigger and bigger. The big things. And like some of them are pinching their hands and crying. I'm like, what's going on? So I asked the little line leader, I was like, Holly, what's going on? Are you gonna let our teacher out now? I didn't really mean that the teacher was in the oh my gosh, I felt like the worst. I'm the worst kindergarten teacher because there's a lot of sarcasm and there's a lot, like that doesn't work developmentally for kindergarten. But it does start to work for fourth grade. So having a little bit of sarcasm in fourth grade, it's pretty awesome. And it helps with inferencing. So if you want to know if a kid is going to do well at inferencing, be sarcastic. You'll know. Another easy way for comprehension is to give a joke. If the kids laugh, they get it. Okay, so over time it looks like this. So your NAEP test, this is green test, the National Assessment of Educational Progress, says, hey, we're not quite proficient, but we're not like tanking. It does not look like this. If you see something that goes up and down and up and down and up and down, it is not a reliable test. It is not reliable. Your STAR test is not reliable. There's lots of reasons why kids do bad on the STAR test. I have seen kids throw up. I have seen kids pinch themselves, cut. I had a middle schooler who cut on her leg, would just actually cut her leg, said it let out the pressure. I've had kids try not to come to school. I've had kids who sit there shaking. I have kids who become like so somatic that they just can't even put the pencil down on the paper. I've had kids who go to a pep rally and then cry because they think everybody else is going to do good at it and they're not.
My little sister, when she was in third grade, right before she took her first STAR test, she threw up all morning because she was so nervous about it.
Yeah, and we as teachers tell them things like eat a good breakfast, and kids are really good at understanding what's going on for teachers. They do. They want to help you. They want to do they really are amazing people. It's why teaching is the best career. When you have a bad day, you get to start again the next day. Like, it never ends. They're great people. They make you laugh. They make you mad. They push your buttons, but you love it. It's an amazing job. But this test puts this sort of layer of film over everything you do that makes you feel like, what if I'm not doing good enough? What if I myself am not good enough? And it puts the film over the kids too, saying, what if I'm not good enough? What an awful thing to tell a kid. No, you suck, man. Like, fourth grade really is not for you. Like, what? How is that helpful in any way? It just isn't. So if this test was to be helpful, one of the big things is you would get the scores early in the year. Because then you could use them to impart teaching, change your teaching. But if you don't get them until April, then all you end up doing is pulling kids and trying to teach them as fast as possible just for them to pass the test. And if a kid can pass a test after 2 weeks of working with you, it's not a good test. It certainly doesn't show what they've learned over time, if they can learn everything in 2 weeks. So just be really wary of this test, and especially what it can do to your teaching. Because if you're hating your job, chances are you're doing a teaching to the test. You should mind yourself. Be aware. Because if you're not loving it, because you're not doing volcanoes, and you're not teaching about Converse high tops, and you're not talking about the famine in Yemen, and you're not things that you're interested in, and that the kids are going to have high interest in, then chances are you're going to hate your job. None of you, there might be one person. None of you are going into this to do worksheets and to do vocabulary where they write it down and they underline it and then they find it in the glossary. None of you are doing it. I'm not saying all that's bad all the time. I'm just saying if that's what you do all the time and all you do is test prep, you will hate this career because you won't get to see the amazing things that kids are. All you'll be doing is worrying and upset, and you're going to do that thing that teachers do where they have teachers are bag ladies. I don't know if you knew this, but you will become one. We're bag people. So we'll have like our lunch bag. We have a bag full of grading and things for school. We have another bag that's our purse. And sometimes if you're going to college, you've got another bag on top of that. And you take these bags with you back and forth. And the bag that you take with you that you never look at is the grading. You take the grading home, you put it by the door, you pick it back up the next day and you go. And until grades are due, and then you're like trying to put them in. And that's because you know your kids. You know who's going to fail. You don't need the worksheet to show you that. And so now it's a matter of picking those kids up, lifting those kids. And lifting doesn't mean working on their worst thing. Lifting usually means working on their best thing. If they're really good at character feelings, like they really understand feelings and they have lots of emotional words for them, you should be working on that because that's going to get you more bang for your buck. you're going to get kids who are going to be commended in that area, which brings the low area up. So if all you do is focus on the low area, be careful. All right. So in kind of talking about this high stakes thing, I want you to realize these are some of the tests that are listed in your textbook. But really all you need to be able to kind of reference for yourself is a norm reference test, which means it's got the bell curve. Okay, that one's going to have the bell curve. So you're always going to have, in any of these tests, 68% are going to be in the middle. Always, any of them. Okay? It's not a bad thing. It just shows what would be normal on the California AT, or one we use in Texas is the Gates-McGinty. That's a reading test. We'd say what's normal for a 10-year-old in 3rd grade. Okay? All right, over here, criterion referenced. We set a limit and we say above or below. That could be like an 80%, but it also could be, in order to pass on to the next thing, the kid has to know 25 sight words. When they can complete 25 sight words, then we can move up to 50 sight words. So our criterion reference test is 25 sight words. Okay. Our diagnostic tests here, we're looking to find out what's wrong, what's going on, or what they're doing really well. Some of these are like gifted as well. So you can look at like the Great Oral Reading Test. It's going to have the kid read to you. You'll do running records, that kind of thing. And it's going to attempt to diagnose something going on. And if I haven't said it before, I don't remember in here. With diagnostic tests, often as reading people, we're doing dyslexia or dysgraphia. Those are comorbid. You'll learn about this later on in the semester, but they're comorbid, meaning that if you have dyslexia, you probably have some parts of dysgraphia, which is the writing part. Like if you're struggling with the reading part, you're often struggling with the writing part too. Not always, but mostly. And so we can diagnose that. However, you also should not have dyslexic kids in special ed. Let me say that again. Dyslexia is a high intelligence disability. That means that the kid that's dyslexic does not have an issue with their IQ. A dyslexic kid is a high intelligence disability. Special education are kids who are struggling, and they're struggling at usually all their subject areas. All kids in special ed struggle with reading, but all kids in special ed do not have dyslexia. Dyslexia is a very specific way that brains utilize the reading. We're going to look at some fMRIs later on when we do dyslexia. So you'll get to see how a dyslexic brain looks different in terms of what lights up than a brain that's just an average reader. So if you look at me as an average reader, my brain is not going to light up in the same as Monica, who might be dyslexic and is attempting to read the same thing. Okay, we light up differently, but we're both smart. All right, these are just some examples. So high stakes assessment is one of those assessments. It's usually one. You get one shot at it, and if good things can come from it or bad things. So if I take my PSATs or my SATs and I do really well, I get money, I get access to certain schools, I get money to travel and go see those schools, I get to wear cords when I graduate, like all sorts of stuff, good things happen. If I do bad at it, well, I'm going to have to join the military. I don't get the chance to go to another college. I'm put into regular classes instead of AP classes, all that stuff. And these are just some of the examples that are high stakes. Like if you don't do well, you can't be a teacher. So you can videotape yourself. You have professors who love you. You have a 4.0. You're the head of a student group. We think you're amazing. We can't wait to be a teacher with you. You take all of your tests and you fail one of them. You fail the one that has music and PE in it. You fail it. I'm sorry, you can't be a teacher. Sorry. That's so high stakes. It's why you guys get so worked up about it and so overwhelmed and scared. It's the same reason kids do, because there's so much at stake with it. And it doesn't equal you being a good teacher. I'm sorry. I know. I've seen teachers who really struggle passing the test who are amazing in the classroom. And I've seen kids who pass the test and are like, they're kind of so-so. So it doesn't tell you. Does that make sense to you, what the difference between the high stakes assessment and a regular assessment is? So let's look. So sometimes, because there's so much at stake for you as a teacher, that sometimes you end up doing bad things. You end up making decisions that are against who you are. I'm going to show you an example of this. And this is just one example. You can actually Google lots of examples.
Now to the school cheating scandal that is gripping the city of Atlanta. A former superintendent and 34 employees accused of an elaborate scheme to fake test scores. 3 of them already turning themselves in this morning. And ABC's Steve Osunsami has the very latest from Atlanta. Steve, good morning.
Good morning, Amy. These are school principals, teachers, test coordinators, even a school secretary, and they all have to turn themselves into the jail today. Early this morning, the first of many mugshots. Tamika Goodson, a school improvement specialist, turning herself in, brought down by the huge cheating scandal rocking Atlanta.
As a parent that wants the best for their child, I'm very disappointed.
The same teachers and school administrators who were bragging just a few years ago about double-digit improvements in standardized test results now charged with racketeering, theft, and false statements, and they've lawyered up. At one school, investigators say the principal and his teachers held after-school parties where they sat around and corrected tests before turning them in to be graded.
The financial terms were a motivation all across the board.
The indictments read like a rap on the mob, and the boss is former Atlanta School Superintendent Beverly Hall, who could see up to 45 years in prison if convicted. She's one of the few expected to spend the night in jail. Her bond could be set as high as $7.5 million. She's accused of firing teachers who couldn't produce higher test scores, giving bonuses to those who did, and ignoring clear signs that teachers were cheating to make the scores happen. She and other accused educators are shouting their innocence.
I am actually considered a criminal for doing the...
Okay. Hopefully you're a little bit shocked by that. Like a little bit. Like, let me tell you, they never did it to hurt kids. Nobody did it to hurt kids. And yet it's a crime to mess with these scores. But hopefully you can kind of see how teachers can sometimes be manipulated into doing things that they don't agree with. Like, you in your heart have to know you are going to give the STAR test. You're going to give it. But how you go about teaching it and what you end up teaching and who you are while you're doing that, there should not be a question of where your heart is. There should not be a question of you doing teaching that's not just about the test. Because the test is a mess. And this whole thing where teachers got money and, achieved better and other teachers didn't, and that's how you get into trouble. And it's not just one. So if you're interested in some of these, you can Google. All sorts of states have had issues with it, including Texas. This guy here, if you don't have him kind of on your Instagram or something, he is hilarious. He is a teacher in Houston, and he does comedy on the side. His name is Eddie B. He does comedy on the side. But I want to show you this. I know I've only got a few minutes left. I'm going to show you this, and then we're going to talk about the project real fast. Oh, yeah. We have to be on slideshow.
That hustling time of year, everybody hustling to learn what they thought they learned. Y'all don't remember nothing? We got a testing coordinator, they ain't coordinate. Why we cramming so hard doing testing time anyway? You ain't handle your business last semester. Now you got me teaching reading and math. I'm a science teacher. I don't know nothing about the little Pythagorean thing. I can't teach no reading. Well, that's a sentence splice. Is this a run-on sentence? Subject or predicate? Subject is y'all getting on my nerve, and I'm the predicate. I don't even know if that's right. You better leave me alone. You barking up the wrong data wall. If I hear one more word about on the bubble kid, I'm gonna jump up in the air, and when I land, whoever I see, I'm a scissor kick. All these challenges. Do the use your strategy challenge. I just gave you the pre-test, son. How you finished already? Check over your work. Well, check over your work again. Take a nap, Tony. Just take a nap. I'm not finna do that with you. You just ain't gonna bubble in nothing. Bubbling in is beneath you. Mr. Brown, what we doing today? Testing. Mr. Brown, what we doing tomorrow? Testing. 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 We test.
We like to test a lot. I think he's pretty great because he sort of puts that little bit of humor in it that can sometimes be sadness or grief or mad or upset, like stages of grief. Because when you become a teacher, all of a sudden everything is about this test, data walls and monitoring all these things, and we start forgetting who the kids are. Like, just make sure you're kind of aware of who the kids are, because the problem with the high stakes test in particular is I want to have a great word for this, but it actually it loses who the kid is. They become a number, they become a score, and they call each other stupid, or they'll call themselves stupid. I've had fourth graders, 10 years old, tell me that I'm horrible at math. I'm stupid. I'm dumb. Dude, you got a lot of school left to already feel like that. And if you feel like that at school, then we need to find places where you can be successful. And oftentimes it's not this test. So here's some of the things that can happen with testing, right? With this high stakes testing. Structural limitation means that you end up doing your tests specifically based on multiple choice. You don't give kids other ways to know things. Misinterpretation or misuse of test results, things like, they didn't do good on their test, put them in the low math class. When really they just didn't do good on the test because they were tired, or they were upset, or they threw up, or it was a bad day, or whatever. the one-size-fits-all approach, I'm going to give one test that's going to fit everybody. It also leads to problems with motivation sometimes. I've had kids who were doing fine in math in my class, took the test showed they weren't doing so well, they got put in a low math group, and then told me they were bad at math. Like, what are you talking about? No, that's not true at all. Teacher job satisfaction, stay power. That's what I'm telling you. If you're doing all this, you're gonna hate your life if all you're doing is testing. So if you find yourself hating your kids and hating what's going on, then you need to reassess what you're doing in the class, because that's probably where the problem is. You're not teaching what you love.
I have a question.
Yeah.
How do students know they're put into a lower level math? Why are they aware of what level they're at?
Because they know each other. I mean, it's the same reason that in school, like when special education, the teacher comes, the special ed kids leave, and all the kids know they're special ed, or they'll know the real smart ones. They'll know the ones that are good at art. Like, I've even had kids go over to the one kid and be like, can you draw me a picture of this for my book? You know, because they know the good art kid. And so when they end up in the low group, they know. And when we get to reading groups a little later on, we're going to look at heterogeneous grouping and homogeneous grouping. So homogeneous grouping is what we often do for tests, which is where we say those that are alike are in a group. So we're like, okay, these are all kids who were struggling with summarization. These are all kids, right? And so then those are the kids that are together. And they know, especially because the same kid will be in the same group. So if he's low in one subject or one area, he'll be low in lots of areas. So if he's low in multiplication, he's going to be low in division. He's going to be low in word problems. So he's always at the bottom. And that's where they distinguish themselves as being dumb, but they also recognize, that you can just tell a difference, even in reading groups. One group is reading Harry Potter, and one group is reading, Sheila and the Unicorn. And they know. They know that they're in the low group. And they'll ask you, when do I get to be in the high group? And you're like, oh, soon. We're going to switch them around a little bit. And I'm going to show you how to do that later on. But good question. The amount of money spent in itself should make you mad. That $1 billion could give each teacher $1,000 to $1,500 to use for books in their classroom instead of giving a test. The last two, really fast. I know we're getting late. I'm keeping you, but stay with me. Or if you need to go ahead. Make sure that if you're leaving, that in the chat box you've told me that you're here so that I can take your attendance, okay? So if you need to leave, go, but I'm going to go ahead and keep teaching. You can look at the video later. These last two, narrowing curriculum, means that I'm teaching to the test. I'm teaching what's on the test. And by narrowing it down, I'm no longer teaching volcanoes and puppy dogs and Converse and Native Americans. Now I'm just teaching what needs to be on the test. And it leads to bad things for kids too. Last one. This one's a killer. It always hurts a little bit when I show it to you guys. We can predict test scores based on zip code. A really good test shouldn't do that, guys. It shouldn't be that I can look at 78209 and go, this is going to be their score between 94 and 98%. And then I can go look at 78201 over in the Midwest side, and I can say, oh, their score is going to be around a 72.3%. And then I can look at some of the scores out in South San, or the zip codes in South San, and go, okay, theirs are going to be like 51%. I can literally do that based on your zip code, which is kind of like socioeconomic status, which means that money, how much money you have, is dictating how good you do on this test. How much money the school has. Not necessarily you, but the school. That's a problem. Tests should be showing me what I need for the kids in my class. They shouldn't be telling me that I work at a shitty school. Like, there's nothing that's good out of that. And we're spending $1 billion to do it. Makes me crazy. This word hegemony is one you should kind of know just in your own vocabulary. What this means is that it means power. So zip codes have a big power, and language has a big power. So if I'm in a district, in a school that has primarily ELL kiddos, I'm going to do worse. Just in general, I'm just going to do worse. It's why they started to make subpopulations and stuff to say, but ultimately it's a hegemony. And very little of our schools in San Antonio have really desegregated. So if you want to look for African-American kids, you go up to Judson. If you're looking for Hispanic kids, well, that's kind of everywhere. And they'll call a diverse school a school that has 95% Hispanic. Guys, that's not diverse. That's a Hispanic school. There's a Hispanic serving school. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's not diverse. Diverse is a school like Colonies North in Northside, where they've got a lot of refugee kids, and they've got just about every color and every language. I think there's something like 90 languages spoken at that school. So that's a school that's got high diversity, which, if on a high-stakes test, you don't want high diversity. You want everybody to be the same. Okay, last thing, this is just kind of for you to take a look at. This is another standardized testing, a little piece for you. And in it, you'll see him talk about, and this is John Oliver, like a night teacher. He teaches, night, whatever teaches. He teaches at night. He does his shows at night. And this is a man who's not necessarily interested in education, but he's realizing some of the stupidity of things that are going on in terms of our education. All right, so let's look at this one. Here he is. What's the name of the place? Palmsville.
Standardized tests. The fastest way to terrify any child with 5 letters outside of just whispering the word clown. It's currently testing season all over the country, and with that comes the usual flood of anxiety and school-produced videos designed to get kids in the mood.
Hey, wait, are you guys seeing the video or are you just hearing it?
We can't see it.
Dang! Okay, hold on. Let's see. I am sharing my screen, but it's not. Hold on, I'm gonna do this. I want you to be able to see this.
You have to stop sharing and then share again when you're on the page.
Well, I'll just share. Can I just share the screen? Can you see it now? Can you see the video now? Thumbs up?
Yes, I can see it.
All right, cool. All right.
2 pencils out. Your number 2 pencils out. Get your number 2 pencils out. What the test say?
Get your number 2 pencils out! Get your number 2 pencils out! Look, standardized tests look like amazing fun. I wish I could take one right now. Bring me a pencil. A number 2, please! But it gets better because one elementary school in Texas even held a test-themed pep rally featuring a monkey mascot. Look, let's all agree there is no scenario in which the words, "Here comes the monkey," can fail to pump you up. Just imagine right now I was your...
Okay, so this would be like a pep rally kind of situation, right? So what happens to your kids who know that they're not going to do very well, just based on history, and they might have some feelings of their own, but you're just kind of worried about them, and they go to the pep rally? Yeah, Francisco says they set him up for failure. Yeah, and it feels really bad. You go to this big pep rally that has nothing to do with doing well on a test, but you go to this pep rally and you're not going to. Kind of last thing, I had a kid, his name was Jonathan, and he came during Hurricane Katrina to my class, and he was down in the 30s when I got him. And he was this kid, great personality. He came to Saturday school. He stayed after school 3 days a week. He went to 2nd grade and did reading with 2nd graders, and then he did 4th grade reading. And he's like one of my stars. He literally was just pulling himself up there every day. Then when he took his test, he made a 68. So he didn't pass. He was the only one, and he didn't pass. Everybody else was going to get to go to a pizza party for passing, and he didn't. But he actually showed more skill growth than any other kid I've ever worked with. Any of them. In my 20 years. Any kid. He grew more than 30 points in a year. He could read. He was writing his name better. He was doing all of these things that he didn't pass. And that's an example of how we hurt kids because of these accountability measures. Because he felt like he wasn't good enough and he didn't get to go to the pizza party. Now, I will tell you, my whole class had a pizza party. We didn't send anybody. But it made him feel like I'm not good enough. I did all this work, Miss Wilson. You promised me. And I did. I promised him. And he didn't pass. He did better than any kid I've ever had. It's probably through college, but he really made big growth. So if we were going to do something that was better for kids, we'd be doing things like portfolios. We would have pre and post tests. We would have value-added measures for teachers, meaning that when I see you doing these particular good things, it's going to add to your evaluation. We're going to look at some more of those later as we go on. Hold on here. All right, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I'm going to come back to you. Stop sharing. Okay, so now let me talk just for a second about your project. It's not due till the end of March, but I want you to start thinking about it. And I haven't finished the write-up. I'll get it up for you soon. Basically, what you're going to be doing is taking a look at what we just talked about here, and doing some additional research about high stakes tests, coming up with what your opinion is. Do you like them or do you not? Or are you sort of in the middle? I've had people who do like them. They feel like it does tell us something about the kids. You can decide what side you're on. Then your goal is to showcase that in 2 different ways. You're going to have lots of choices for how you do it, but you're going to pick 2. So you could come up with your own. I've had people make a pamphlet for a parent describing high stakes tests. I've had people write papers. I've done that for years, write a paper. I've had people make posters. I've had people do speeches. I've had people where they do a speech and they record themselves. I've had people come up with a reader's theater about it. So, hold on just a second. My dogs are being crazy. Why are you in here? Man, it's like children. So sorry. And I guess I could share my video with you. So you're going to need to figure out 2 groups of people that you want to talk to about high stakes testing. This could be a layperson. You're going to do it at your kid's daycare, or you're going to talk to the teacher next door, or you're going to have 2 different things that you have to pick out. So you could do a paper and then you do your speech. You could do a poster and then you do a sculpture and you write about how it is. You could do a reader's theater and a paper. So you're going to choose 2 different ways to showcase something, or you're thinking about that right now. You're choosing kind of, these are my top 2. These are the 2 things that I think you're going to do, that I might do. That's all you have to do now. 2 ways to show what you've learned about high stakes assessment. The other little piece is, I will put some of these up for you, but I would love for you to go in and Google associations like the Literacy Association, American Educational Research Association. If you don't know what they are, then put in reading associations and you'll get some, okay? And what I'd like for you to do is take that reading association, put it into your bar, your Google bar, and then add high stakes testing. So you would say AERA, high stakes testing. One of the first things that's going to come up is what their stance is on high stakes tests. So they're going to tell you, hey, we agree that these are good and here's why. Or they're going to tell you these are awful and this is what it does that is so bad. I'm going to tell you, you will have a hard time finding associations involved with literacy and schools that are for high stakes testing, and yet we do it. Okay? But if you're having trouble with that, I will put a couple of them up there for you right now for next time when I see you. I'd just like for you to be thinking of, hey, I really want to do a poster and a speech. You don't have to choose anything, don't start anything, just be thinking about what you want to do. Okay, you can start looking at some of the associations as well, because you'll need at least 2 of those in your paper or your project. Lastly, the last week of February, the 22nd to the 26th, we will not have class face-to-face. I know you'll miss me, I know. So on the 23rd, which is your day, you will not have class with me, you will just be doing your regular stuff online. Okay, you'll have like a work week. I'm going to send you to some certain websites as well that'll help this paper and stuff that you're going to write. And you're saying, how long does the paper have to be? And I'm going to say, I don't know. How long does the Reader's Theater? I don't know. It needs to make sense for you and be something that is it needs to be meaningful for you, not something that you're just doing for me. The topic is just for me, but you're about to be a teacher, so please try to make it meaningful for you. A pamphlet to hand to parents, like I said, about anything. I had one student, maybe I'll show it to you. I had one student do an interpretive dance about high stakes assessment. And it was really like, you could feel the sadness of this kid that she was embodying. Oh my gosh, it was really pretty cool. You don't have to dance. I don't dance, you don't have to dance, but that's kind of